Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road journey. This week we're still exploring the huge county that is North Yorkshire. In the last episode we enjoyed some time at the seaside, sort of, but today we're heading more inland and maybe we'll catch a glimpse of some of that wonderful countryside that North Yorkshire is known for on a journey that'll take us from Thirsk to Skipton. As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and Thirsk might have been a bad choice. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's lovely and all, but there's just nothing of interest here, and it would seem that the people who used to live here agreed. In the days of my guidebook, there were around 13,000 residents, whereas today, it's nearer 5. That tells us everything we need to know. That said, my guidebook does make one suggestion on something interesting to look at. It says church. That's it. I assume it means this one, known as St Mary's Church. It's a church with the same story as all of the others that we've seen throughout the series, built in the 1400s, probably rebuilt and restored in the 1800s, and of course it has a long organ with a massive bell. And did I really just come here to make that joke? Yes, and besides, if you want to see a church, you'd be better off nipping down the road to take a look at Ripon Cathedral, church number 4 to sit on the site, restored in 1836, and it's a bit of a mess of building styles having been cobbled together over various periods of time. For example, the 2 large towers are a 1200s design, the large decorated window from 1300. The south side looks like a completely different building, and inside there are pillars that don't match around the central tower. In 1450, the tower collapsed, apparently during an earthquake, but halfway through rebuilding it, the project was cancelled and the construction company, or whatever it was in those days, were instructed to leave it as it is and just make it work. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit Studley Park, found just on the outskirts of Ripon. Today it's owned by the National Trust, but the bit I'm interested in doesn't have an entry fee. £6 for the car park though. Anyway, Studley Park is or was a huge country estate that's perhaps most well known for being home to Fountains Abbey, a fantastic example of a medieval abbey ruin, but we've done enough churches for today. Instead, I'm looking for some bricks, because in the old days, the manor house on the estate was powered by a hydroelectric system, and it's around here somewhere that the generators were installed, the brickwork being the only giveaway. To operate the generators, the River Skell that runs through the estate had a dam added, and the electricity generated would run down copper wires built into stone and concrete ducts connecting to a battery storage site, which would then send power on to the manor house. And this was all in 1891. I've no idea why we're not doing more of this. They had electric cars back then as well, and used glass bottles. We're a backward bunch, aren't we? Anyway, moving on, and we're heading towards Knaresborough next via the A61 and B6165, which seem to remain unchanged since the old days. And speaking of old things, in the middle of Knaresborough is the Old Chemist, which, as the name suggests, is an old chemist, but this is the oldest chemist in the country, having opened in 1720, making it older than the United States as we know it. To be fair, it's the Old Chemist in name only. In 1998, it stopped operating as an official chemist, but that's allowed considering they were going for 278 years. Today you can visit the chemist and look at some of the original fixtures and fittings, as well as get yourself a lovely cup of Yorkshire tea. More on that later. My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to visit the dropping well, which it says costs £6 for entry, the equivalent of about 80p today, and that's alright. Except it's 15 bloody quid to get in, on foot. If you want to come in the car, it's £39. It's cheaper to stay at home and do crack, but the guidebook recommends it, so it must be good. The dropping well that my guidebook mentions is a wishing well found within a limestone cave that has lots of folklore surrounding it. Moving on, and the main exhibit is what's known as the Petrifying or Petrifying well, a unique natural formation where water with a high mineral content can turn items into stone. In the same way that a stalactite might form, water drips over the items and then leaves behind a trail of minerals, and over the years you'll get full coverage. These items are then sold in the gift shop along with bottled magical water from the well. It's an expensive day out, this one, but my reason for coming here is that the caves and the wells are said to be the first tourist attraction in the country ever. They've been charging visitors for entry as far back as 1630, and they're still at it today. Now, about that Yorkshire tea. The company behind the finest tea in the land originate from and are based in Harrogate, today known as Betty's and Taylor's. In 1919, a tea room would open in Harrogate known as Betty's, and whilst you would think Betty was a lovely old dear from the Yorkshire Dales, no, it was set up by a bloke called Fred, a Swiss confectioner. Nobody knows why it was called Betty's. To be fair, I'm not much of a tea guy, I prefer coffee, but lucky for me, some years earlier, in 1886, Charles Taylor would set up some cafes in Harrogate where he specialised in coffee, realising that the water tasted different from street to street, so he set about creating the perfect coffee blends to suit the different waters, which he would then sell from cafes or kiosks around Harrogate. Betty's and Taylor's would merge in the 1960s and then go on to create the famous Yorkshire tea and Taylor's of Harrogate coffee, and it's all good stuff. My guidebook makes quite a good suggestion on something to keep us entertained after all of that tea and coffee, and it's a visit to Harlow Hill Observatory. Built in 1829, it's a grade-listed structure, because of course it is, that stands at about 28 metres high, and whilst in later years it may well have been used to observe the stars, that wasn't its intended use, and actually it's why I quite like this structure. It was built simply because someone wanted to provide a way to get a better view of the area, which, according to the bloke that built it, includes 3 cathedrals, 17 castles and over 200 churches. There's no memorials or religious connections or reasoning for its construction. It was literally just something to do. We're going to head out of Harrogate now along the A59, which all goes to shit when we reach a place called Blubberhouses. Silly name. The road used to go this way before it was realigned, which usually wouldn't be an issue. We could have used the old road, but the A59 has been realigned once more, and the new alignment has been built on the original A59, so there's 3 versions of the A59 here somewhere, and I've no idea which we'll be using. But I'll work it out later, because I've made a quick detour to take a look at the Toft Gate lime kiln, not far from Blubberhouses, handily located on the B6265 with its own car park. The exact history of the kiln is unclear, but it's believed to have been built sometime around 1860, and it would have been used to manufacture quicklime, which is used in things like plaster and mortar, and it's also an ingredient within the steel making process. To make quicklime, one has to dig out limestone and then heat it to an incredibly high temperature, hence the kiln, but of course it might also be useful to have a limestone quarry of sorts nearby. Here is one, the Toft Gate Quarry, and it is of course all part of the same site. You would dig out the limestone over there, chuck it in your kiln over here, and that would make for a very efficient setup. The quarry is still being quarried today, and there's a handy viewing point added for your convenience. Okay, it's not the direction I intended to go in, but just quickly, if you visit Pateley Bridge, the nearest village to the kiln, you'll find England's oldest sweet shop, which was established in 1827. It's not as old as the oldest chemist, or your mum for that matter, but good sweets. Well, that was fun, but detour's over and it's time to get back on track, and I might as well just go back the way I came because it's quickest, and I'll rejoin the A59 heading towards our final destination, the town of Skipton. Which is a small town of around 15,000 that in the days of my guidebook wasn't much smaller, with around 12,000 residents. In the very old days, it was a simple milling town that got by just fine. It never really evolved into an industrial giant, instead deciding to focus on tourism as of the 20th century. And what better way to attract visitors than with an old mill that was no doubt lying around. Highcorn Mill is one of the oldest mills in the country, having been built in 1310, although only half of the original buildings survive today. The most interesting feature is the mill's water wheel, which back in the day was used to run the mill's machinery, but in more modern times it's been converted and plugged into the national grid so it can generate electricity for 20 buildings in the vicinity, the perfect reuse of such an old building. Also, you can visit and take a look at the water wheel and the mill's workings for free. Take note, Knaresborough dropping well, 15 quid, ridiculous. Okay. Oh my God. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there's of course a button specifically for that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'll be wicked sweet. Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John. You've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.